2 of this build of the Enterprise-C. Right now what I'm in the process of doing is painting the stripes along the primary hull. I wasn't sure I was going to do that, but I figured I've done so much with this model already, I might as well just give it a try. Actually, it was not the hardest thing to do. I found painting the stripes on the cells a lot harder, again, simply because of the masking, not so much the actual painting. But if you are going to do this model and you plan to do the stripes around the primary hull, whatever you do, just make sure you're cutting those curves like I showed you in the previous video, and that's what allows you to get pretty evenly around the edges of the saucer. So it wasn't really the hardest thing to do. It's a little time consuming, but to lay the masking tape down really wasn't that bad. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and proceed now with this last stripe, and then I will show you when it's done. Lighting's a little bright here. Hopefully you can appreciate now the stripes that have been added to the primary hull here. They've all been completed here. There are 3 stripes altogether. I went ahead and painted the yellow patterns here, which I believe are the thrusters, and I've also applied the gray color to the phaser banks. Alright, so I'm getting ready now to paint the deflector dish. Since I'm not going to light the model, I'm going to try to duplicate, or at least simulate anyway, a glowing deflector dish. So what I'm going to do is take a lighter color blue and take my airbrush and create like a hazy area in the middle, and then paint darker blue around the edge, and hopefully that'll give us kind of a glowing center. So we'll see what happens. Alright, so hopefully you can see it in this lighting. It's a little bright here this morning, and but essentially I am happy with the way this looks. It definitely gave me the glowing effect that I was after. What you see here is a lighter colored center surrounded by a darker rim. And let's see if I can change the light. Here you go. So you can see how it's a nice feathered effect. Again, this was applied by using an airbrush with the lighter color in the center. So painting like a circular feathered pattern in the center there. And then after that I applied the darker coating behind it, and it left us with this effect that you see here. The center area was then masked off with liquid mask. In fact, this is a remnant of the liquid mask here. And then I applied the same color as the rest of the hull, which is the light gray. Now the center section here you can see is glossy, and that's really the way it comes. It's this glossy plastic. But the back side was treated with a dull coat first, as well as the rim here was also treated with a dull coat, and that way it gave something for the paint to hang on to. Otherwise, if it's just shiny like this, the paint's just going to run off. So the effect looks really good here. I'm very, very happy with it. Let me go ahead and put this in the secondary hull, and you can see what it looks like together. Alright, so hopefully this lighting will give you guys a better view of this. This is now the antenna dish placed into the secondary hull, and you can see this is the glowing effect that I was after. So again, very pleased with the way this turned out. You ought to give it a shot if you're building a model like this. It really adds a nice professional look. Alright, so the model's coming along here. What I'm working now on are the nacelles. I had everything pieced together and even had the Bussard collectors on, but I took a second look at these seams here and decided to do something about it. So I'm not going to work too hard on it. I'm just going to smooth it over so it doesn't look quite as obvious. These seams are, of course, created by the 2 halves. So in order to get to this area here, I'm going to be using the sanding block, which has a pointed tip on each end here. And this is going to allow me to come into the piece at this angle here and just kind of sand away at the seam. And then I'm going to use a few different grades of sandpaper so I can smooth that over, and then I'll finally paint it over. The one thing I did do here prior to this is I did apply the liquid cement that I like using, this Pro Weld cement here, and that just helps to soften up the plastic and, well, like the name implies, weld the plastic together so we can get a nice smooth transition here. Alright, so I'm going to work on that and paint that, and we'll move on. Okay, so here we have the seams here that I've sanded down, and now I have to repaint it. So this is a trick I just wanted to show you real quick that I learned from TrekWorks, so that we don't end up with delineated areas here as we mask it off. What I did was I took some masking tape and left it curled and open here to protect the upper and lower portions, and of course I masked off the other areas here, and that way when you paint it, you'll end up with a nice smooth paint job here and not end up with any weird lines. So it's definitely a trick that works really well. Alright, so moving on now to the final stage, and that's coloring the windows in. The decals now have been put into place, and so I'm going to now fill in the windows by using this micron marker. The marker has a fine enough tip to allow me now to fit into these little slots here and color them. I don't fill in every single window because I think that looks a bit too much, but kind of just go with like a pattern of 2, then skip a few, and then go 1, and then 3, and so on and so forth. And I think that looks pretty good. Alright, so once I'm done with that, I'll piece the model together and we'll do a wrap-up here. Alright, so here we have the completed model of the USS Enterprise-C. Again, this is the AMT kit that was released, I believe, in the late 90s. I don't quite remember, but it is a 1/1000 scale model kit. Measures about 15 inches from front to back. So I can say, comparing this to the pictures that I have of the original miniature, for the most part it is a fairly accurate representation of the ship. There are a couple differences. One which I can point out here is that the secondary hull I know narrows down a little bit more than what we see here, but it's a decent replica of the ship. The model does sport a different paint scheme than most Federation ships that we're used to seeing, and I think that is your main challenge with this ship, as you can tell as I was mentioning numerous times as I was building this model, is that there's a lot of masking and painting that needs to take place here. So that is something that's very time consuming, but you know, it is a very unique paint scheme and makes the model certainly look different from most of the other ships that we see on the series. And turning the model to this position here, you can see the underside of the kit. As you can see, again, a lot of detail painting that is required here. I did purchase the decals from JT Graphics, and that added some nice touches here. I think the decals are better looking than the ones that came with the model kit, and hopefully won't yellow on us as time goes by. And certainly one of the things that comes with the decal sheet are the decals for each of the escape pods. And although it's very tiny to read, each of them has the NCC 1701 designation here. So as you can see, again, a lot of striping that has to be done here with painting along the nacelles, and that takes a bit of time to mask off. And again, you can see that the antenna dish has that feathered effect that I was looking for there, and I think that adds a nice touch as well. I have to say I'm pretty happy with the way the colors turned out. The base color of the ship again was Tester's light gray. The blues were achieved with the use of Tamiya's sky blue with white to get the lighter color, and then I added a neutral gray to achieve the darker tones. I wish I could come up with exact percentages, but basically when I mix these colors I just mix them until I get the color that I'm looking for. You don't really have to add a ton of sky blue to white to get this lighter shade. So you can start with that, maybe about 10% of the sky blue mixed with the white, and maybe go up to 20 to 25% for the darker blue and mix in the dark gray. So again, you just kind of play around with those till you get to the colors that you are looking for. The Passard collectors, I basically did those the same way I've done some of my other Enterprise models. I took the clear piece, coated it with a dull coat, and then applied a clear red to the interior. And I like the way that turns out. In certain types of lighting, it makes it look like the Passard collectors are glowing. Okay, so I guess that wraps up the build of the NCC 1701C Enterprise kit. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. As usual, you can always post a question on my YouTube channel or email me if you have any. And as usual, I'd like to thank you for watching my videos. I will see you then in the next one.